Okay, so it's been a while since we've been together. So let me just remind you guys the series that we're working on. It's called Enemies of the Heart. And so we talked about how a lot of times we don't actually evaluate what's going on in our hearts. And so, but I think a lot of us were more familiar with guilt and anger. But, we don't really know how to process some of these things. And so last couple of months ago, it's been about like 2 months since we met now, we went over those. So the next 2 weeks or next couple of weeks, we're going to go over greed and then jealousy. Okay. So let me just start off by saying probably I would say greed, and it's going to explain more. I would say probably 99.9% of the people have it, okay? But only probably 0.001% think they have it. Yeah. So I would say out of the four, in that sense, greed is the most dangerous, I would say. Whereas like people would say, yeah, I have guilty feelings or I have anger issues. At least they're like at some point in life, I felt guilt before, I felt anger before, I felt jealous before. But greed, most people, and we're gonna talk about why, but most people don't think they're greedy. But we all know somebody who's greedy. So there are greedy people out there, right? But if I ask individuals, they don't think they're greedy. Most, I would say. Okay? So that's what we're going to talk about. What is greed? Let's do a quick review. Guilt said, I owe you. Remember, I owe you something. Anger says, you owe me. Okay? The third treacherous enemy on our list is greed. Greed says, I owe me. Interesting. So I don't think it's the best definition, but he's trying to get clever. You see, like everything is like something with O. So let's just go with it, okay? Let me read a little bit more. Bottom line, the greedy people believe that they deserve. Okay, so this is his definition. The greedy people believe they deserve every good things that comes their way. Okay, so it's kind of entitlement a little bit. Not only that, but they believe that they deserve every good thing that could possibly come their way. Their mantra is, what's mine is mine because I've earned it. Okay? And I've got a lot more coming. Consequently, it's hard to get a greedy person to part with money and stuff. Why? Because it's theirs. They've earned it. Okay? And we're going to talk about the deeper issue, which is fear as well. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit more. All right. Grace, if you could read this for us.
Like the angry man or woman, greedy people usually have a story to explain why they behave the way they do. For example, being raised in a home with little or no financial security might explain why they tend to hold tight to whatever amount of money comes their way. Similarly, it's easy to understand why people who once lost everything would cling to what they have now.
That makes sense, right? There's an explanation for why I don't give, why I don't share. Why? Because when I was younger, for example, right, I didn't grow up very, very rich. And so I had no security. I never knew what's going to happen. So, hey, I got to keep some money just in case something happens. Does that make sense? Okay. Is that a valid reason? That's a pretty valid reason. But you see, every single greedy person thinks that way. No, not specifically that way, but what we're trying to say is behind greed, or we hide something good behind greed. Okay. Greed always hides something behind like a good reason. And that's why nobody knows that they're actually greedy. Okay, let's continue on.
Greed is a different breed than the other three enemies of the heart we'll discuss. Greed disguises itself. In fact, while reading these last couple of paragraphs, you may have already had a thought along the lines of, here's one issue I don't struggle with. You may even have been tempted to skip ahead. After all, you may have the occasional angry outburst and you may harbor a few guilty secrets. But you certainly aren't greedy. Right now, I think about it, I've never met a person who thought they had a greed problem. Why is that?
Yeah. Okay, so we'll talk about again, why is it that nobody thinks they're greedy? I don't know about Tim. I have done counseling with a lot of people, and people have shared a lot of personal things, but I have never, ever had somebody come up to me and said, I have a problem with money. As in, like, I love money too much. I've never, ever had anybody come up to me and say that. Did anybody? No. So never about greed. Okay? Let's continue on. Why is it that? Why is it? Okay, continue on.
The truth is, we've made it almost impossible to identify greed in our own lives. Unlike anger or guilt, greed hides behind several virtues. Greedy people are savers, and saving is a good thing. Greedy people are often planners, and planning is a good thing. Greedy people want to make sure their financial future is secure, and that's a good thing as well, right? Greed is easy to hide from ourselves, but the people around us know, because although it may be difficult for us, it isn't difficult at all to see in the people around us.
Okay. So again, greed, it always hides. It's always disguising itself. Right? We always say, well, how about security? How about retirement? Right? How about this? How about that? Well, in the past, this happened, this happened, this happened. So those things in themselves, they're not necessarily bad, are they? No. Who's going to tell you up front, how dare you not share your money? Does that make sense? Again, but what I'm trying to say is, but we look at how some people spend their money or don't share their money or how they deal with money, and you go, man, that person's really greedy, or that person is obsessed over money. Okay? But what I'm trying to tell you is they themselves, even though it's very apparent to you, they themselves never see themselves like that. And again, that's why most people, majority of people, including myself, do not think that I'm greedy. Okay? But I would say most of us actually have a greed problem. Okay. Let's see. Wind, yeah. Okay, so far, let's go into our groups. Do you agree with this so far? You guys could disagree, right? So, agree, disagree? Go for it. What do you guys think so far?
Treasure and hold. Even the breath that I breathe is not my own. There's more to be gathered than riches, more for the body than clothes. A power to keep me alive is yours alone, yours alone. My worry can't add to your purpose. My questions don't hinder your plan. My future is held in the hollow of your hand. Yeah. First things first, I will seek and thirst for your kingdom, God, your righteousness. Put you first, 'cause I know
So let's go back to the last line, but the people around us know. Okay? So one exercise you can do is if you feel like you don't know whether you are greedy or not, ask somebody around you. But yeah, but also know that so if that person is going to be very honest, right? But most people are not going to be very honest with you. But that also tells you something. Why can't they be straight up with you? Okay. But people could be wrong too. I'm just letting you know. So what I really suggest, but no one's going to do this, by the way. None of you guys are going to do this. But if you really want to know whether you're greedy or not, is make a list of how you spend your money. Okay, like your what do you ledger of like your 1 month, and show it to someone. Okay, to see whether you're greedy or not. Okay, because on the outside they don't know who you're giving to, right? They might just see how you're spending money, but maybe you're giving a lot, and they don't know that. They don't see that. But actually, if you're comfortable enough, if you feel like you're not, hey, I'm not greedy, then make a ledger of how much your money. Do it for even a week, and actually show it to somebody and say, "Do you think this is greedy?" But most of you are not going to do that. But another this is probably the best is if God were to look at how you're spending your money, would He say you're greedy or not? That would be probably one of the best ways. Okay. Do you have a question?
We are going to talk about what is being greedy, right?
According to this author, he's saying if you feel like everything that comes your way is like that it's mine, basically. That itself is greedy. But I don't think that's the best definition. I would say the best definition of being greedy is basically you have way too, like number one is you always want more. Like you're never satisfied. You always want more. More is always better. Like more money is better for you. That's number one. I think second thing is if you're way overly dependent on it, right? Your security, your identity is tied up to it. I mean, it is to a certain degree, but like way too much. And then I think another good tell sign whether you're greedy or not is like your life revolves around money. Your whole life is about money. How can I get more? And you're not thinking about giving. So I think I think it's hard to define it exactly, but the biblical definition of someone greedy is someone who loves money more than God, basically. Right? It's not money itself is not a bad thing, but it talks about how it says the root of all sin is love of money. Right? And also, by the way, most of us, we think, people who are greedy are rich. But that's actually not the case. You could have zero money, but you could be greedy. Right? Because all you're thinking about is money. I want more money, even if you're poor. Yeah.
So then being stingy can be ourselves.
It can be. It doesn't necessarily always have to be. And that's why it's also hard with greed. Whereas, for example, if I lied, it's pretty simple. If I cheated, if I cheated on my wife, it's pretty clear. I don't have to guess, did I cheat on my wife or did I not? You know what I mean? I didn't know that was grace. You know what I mean? It's pretty clear, when you committed adultery. But greed is hard because it's how much is too much? Well, it depends who's, right? There's all of these factors going on. And so that's why it's really hard to pinpoint you're being greedy or you're not being greedy. Yeah. Let's continue on, and then there will be more questions. By the way, another thing, I talked about this in the sermon while we were talking about elimination of hurry, but it's also difficult for us to always see that we're greedy or that we're actually wealthy. And that's also because whenever the people that we're always hanging out with, we always usually hang out with people who are almost always in the same socioeconomic status as us. Most of us, if you make a certain amount of money, then you're going to live at a certain place, certain house. Does that make sense? And so what you do is, or even this community. But what do? You always look at someone within here who's richer than you. And so you never feel poor. Or you always feel, Sorry, you never feel rich. And so you always feel like you never have enough. Okay. So we have to recognize that. That's like literally within us. Yeah. All right, continuing on. Who's next? Is it Kevin? Kevin.
If ever can identify almost instantly in someone else, they talk a lot, worry a lot about money. They're not cheerful givers. They are reluctant to share. They talk as if they have just enough to get by. They won't let you forget what they've done for you. They are reluctant to express gratitude. They attempt to control people with their money.
So I guess these are also good indicators too. Yeah. So you can do an inventory check, but we will also do a lab on greed as well. Next one.
Greed knows no economic boundaries. I've met greedy poor people and greedy rich people. Greed isn't a financial issue, it's a heart issue. Financial gain doesn't make greedy people less greedy. Financial gain or loss doesn't change anything because greed emanates from the heart.
Yeah, and so that's why this is not a money issue. This is not a finance issue, and that's why we say this is a heart issue, because your heart doesn't change, depending on right. Because if you want more money and you got that amount, you should be satisfied then. Then maybe you're not greedy. But if you want more, you're like, oh, that's not enough. I deserve more. Then again, that's a heart problem. Continuing on.
Is this an issue for you? Is it hard for you to give away money? Do you ask questions intended to make you look like a careful steward when in fact you're looking for an excuse not to give? In other words, are there always strings attached to your gifts? If this is a heart issue for you, then I can assure you that your family and friends feel like they're competing with your stuff. At times they'll feel like you value your stuff over them.
Okay. Very good, very good. Let's continue on. So let's go a little bit deeper and dissect this disease that a lot of us struggle with.
Consider this warning issued by Jesus himself. Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Be on your guard. Why? Because of the 4 heart conditions we'll discuss. Greed is the most subtle of all. Look closely at the second part of what Jesus says. For the greedy person's stuff equals life. They bought into the lie. My stuff is my life. And so to tamper with or ask for their stuff is personally threatening. Their stuff is an extension of who they are.
Okay, so 2 parts right here. The first part is, and it's also interesting, right? It says, watch out, be on guard. Jesus never says, watch out, be on guard for anger. Watch out, be on guard for guilt. Or watch out, be on guard for jealousy. Right? But again, he says, watch out. You guys got to watch out for greed. Because again, it's very subtle. It's always hiding. We never think we have an issue with greed. Okay? And the second part is what? It's this idea, again, life does not consist in an abundance of possession. But that's the lie that it tells us, right? Money has such a strong force within us, which is you have more money, your life is going to be better. You have more money, it's going to be great. More money, more happy. Why wouldn't you make more money? Get more money. Okay? So again, then you buy into the lie, my stuff, my money is my life. Okay, let's continue on.
Let's dissect greed. Fear is the driving force behind greed. Fear fuels greed. Why don't I want anybody messing with my good stuff? I'm afraid of what might happen to it. Greed is supported by an endless cast of what ifs. What if it gets scratched? What if it gets lost? What if there's not enough? What if the economy collapses?
Okay. So again, this is just one of it. It's not, I would say, primary. I would say this is primary, one of the primary, but there's other reasons for greed too. But again, it's fear. And that's why I can't share. And that's why I can't give. Because again, what if this happens? What if this happens? In the past, this happened to me. So what if? Okay, continuing on. Luito?
People with greed lodged in their heart fear that God either can't or won't take care of them. And the gap between what they suspect God might be willing to do and what they want becomes a major source of anxiety. So greedy people shoulder the burden to acquire and maintain everything they need to provide the sense of security they desire.
Very interesting, huh? So instead of trusting God, they go, oh, I'll just get more. Then I'll feel more secure. Okay. But here, therein lies the problem. There's never enough. Okay, there's never enough. And that's also the problem. There is just never enough. How much money is enough for security? Never. It's never enough. Greedy people never have enough to satisfy their need to feel secure in the light of every conceivable eventuality. There's always another what if that drives them to acquire more. Yeah, because what if can be limitless. So therefore, your expense can be limitless. So therefore, you should make a limitless amount of money. Their appetite cannot be satisfied. Consequently, greedy people are rarely at peace with others and never at peace with themselves. Why? Because there's always that constant angst of there's not enough, and I'm never ready for that what if. Okay? So you see again how that can mess up with your heart a lot, and that could drive workaholism or like obsession with money, right? Feeling like your friends or family feeling like stuff, material, money is more important than personal relationships. So all of these things, it's rooted out of greed. It could be. It's not the only thing, of course. Continuing on.
Lucky me, Jesus once told a parable about a wealthy landowner whose property yielded a much larger crop than he expected or needed. His good fortune has left him with a dilemma. He has no place to store this bountiful harvest. What am I going to do with all my stuff that I have as a result of my hard work? The landowner has no place to store his crops. That's uh, that's farmer talk for sake. What he needs is a place to hoard his results.
Okay, so there's a story, and Jesus tells a parable. Okay, so he's a farmer, and he got really, really lucky. And he expected this much, but kind of winning the lottery. Okay, or maybe he got a bonus. Maybe that's a better word. He got a bonus. And he's like, there's so much more. I don't have space, so I'm going to build another one. Barn to store all this stuff. Continuing on.
In a farmer society, it would be immediately obvious that the abundance of this man's harvest had little to do with his hard work. Farmers are always at the mercy of factors over which they have no control. But the greedy man doesn't see the world that way. What comes their way does so because they've earned it. We're no different way.
Okay, let's see what this means. Continuing on.
Since this landowner believes he has earned this abundance, he never considers the notion that God might have had anything to do with it. And it never crosses the landowner's mind that the extra he has been blessed with is intended for anyone's consumption but his own. I'm no different. When I come into a little extra, I think, lucky me. Like the landowner in the parable, I can always come up with a plan for the extra. And I generally assume it's meant for me. After all, I earned it. Therefore, I deserve it. So I store it, which is exactly what the landowner decides to do.
Okay, does it make sense so far? So he says, I got lucky, and so it's all for me. Okay, but again, we miss God in midst of all of these things. We just go, I deserve this. It's all my hard work. It's all about me. It's mine. Okay, continuing on.
Human mind greed is always looking for something good to hide behind. For instance, this man has decided to build a bigger farm to secure his future. Nothing wrong with that.
Okay, so again, we have to think about that, right? Again, his thing is, hey, it's good for me, for my future, for my retirement. This is good. It's a good thing. Okay, let's continue on.
Oh, the irony. If the story ended there, we might even consider this man a role model. But the story doesn't end there. While it's true that the landowner planned ahead, he didn't plan far enough ahead. He assumed that he had an abundance of stuff assured him an abundance of time. But the two don't have anything to do with each other. The very day the landowner made the decision to keep everything he'd earned, he lost it.
Mm-hmm. So we actually see that that day, like the day after, he dies. Okay, so let's continue.
Just after this man made his plan, he received some shocking news. He'll die sometime in the night. He's about to learn the hard way that his life is not equivalent to the amount of his possessions. He will run out of time before he runs out of stuff. When God delivers the bad news, he asks the landowner a question that's loaded with implication for each of us. God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?"
Okay, let's continue on.
The answer to this question is obvious. Someone else. Someone else will end up with everything he has earned and consequently deserved. All his possessions will be distributed to others. Not because he's generous, but because he's dead. More irony.
So very, very interesting. Okay, so the irony is that every single one of us is actually at one point in our life going to give everything that we have away. Every single one of us. Okay, and some of us, we're going to do it intentionally because we want to give it. And some of us, we have to give stuff away because we died. Does that make sense? So all of us are going, like everything that we own, like someone else is going to own it one day. Right? And so again, it's either we have a choice to do it or it's going to just, someone's going to just decide for us. So that's why he's saying that's the irony. Right? He gave so much probably to people, somebody, but not because he's generous, but because he's dead. Continuing on.
This story directs our attention to an often overlooked reality. Eventually, everything we claim to own will be owned by somebody else. So to assume that everything that comes our way is for our own consumption is short-sighted and foolish. It's not a matter of if somebody else will get it, it's just a matter of when and how. Either we'll give it away while we still have time, or it will be taken away when our time runs out.
Okay, so what do you guys think so far about this parable and this concept of one day we're going to be giving stuff away, whether we like it or not? What does that mean for you? Get together with your groups, just talk about, process together what you are thinking. Go for it.
Like, where do we draw that?
Trying my way, chasing the wind, went astray in sinking sand. Leaned on my understanding till you showed me your ways are better than mine. Always, always, your thoughts are divine. As high as the heavens above the earth. Your ways are better. Oh, better. All like sheep, we've gone astray. You found me and took my place. Oh, my